Hey, Tyler, I did not send you an email, but I would like to speak during the public comment portion, if that's possible.
Thank you.
You might want to ask if anybody else is wanting to talk and public comment on non-agenda items, just in case. And I don't know why, Gary, you sound really muted. Or am I the only one who had that occur? Maybe everybody else could hear him. I could hardly hear him.
Joe, when I go to talk, I'll take my earbuds out and use my speaker on my laptop.
Okay.
Well, that sounded good that time. That sounded better.
Okay.
Okay, is the light green, Tyler?
Access Humboldt has us running. I am going to have us running very shortly, and we are good to go.
Very good. Okay, well, welcome everybody. I'll call to order the September 10th meeting of the Humboldt Waste Management Board of Directors. And can we have a roll call, please?
Yes, Pereira.
Here.
Sweeney.
Here.
Wilson.
Here.
Castellano.
Here.
Hogan.
Here.
And Bone.
Couldn't imagine being anywhere else.
Hey, there he is, the green phone man. Okay. So next item on our agenda is the consent calendar. You all know all matters under the consent calendar are considered to be routine by the Board of Directors and will be enacted upon by one motion unless a specific request for review is made by a board member or a member of the public. The consent calendar will not be read, and there will be no separate discussion of these items unless polled for discussions. Is there any member of the board that would like to pull an item from the consent calendar? Seeing none, is there any member of the public that would like to pull an item from the consent calendar? Seeing or hearing none, can I entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar?
I'll make
Make a motion.
Okay, we have two motions. One's,
I'll be two.
okay, so
Humboldt will be two.
we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Do we want to go down the roll call on this one, Tyler?
If you would like me to, yes.
Yes, please.
Pereira.
Aye.
Sweeney.
Aye.
Wilson.
Yes.
Castellano.
Aye.
Hogan.
Aye.
Bone.
All right, matter of record, Tyler, you might be just say, ask if there's any nays and it'll be quicker.
That's fair. I've gotten myself into a thing.
Okay, motion carries. Next item on our agenda is oral and written communications. This is a time provided for people to address the board or to submit written communications concerning matters not on this agenda. Is there anyone that wishes to speak to an item that is not on this evening's agenda?
Chair, I have a couple items that I'd like to talk about if possible.
Okay, very good. Please go ahead.
I just wanted to give the board an update with the closure of Highway 199 due to the fires on the border. I've been working with Bettendorf Trucking and keeping Jill appraised of what's been going on. So yesterday, we actually had trucks that were turned around because of the closure. Some made it through. They didn't make it back. They had to take alternate routes. So we set up a transportation alternate route. Bettendorf is utilizing their yard in the Reading Anderson area to stage trucks. So the waste out of Humboldt is now going to that area where it's being picked up by trucks coming out of the White City Yard here in the Medford area, and they're dropping empties and picking up fulls. As just recently as 30, 40 minutes ago. Hambro, working with the Del Norte Waste Authority, has gotten permission for trucks to utilize 199 tonight. And it'll be going through because we are actually servicing the utility or the Humboldt Waste Management Authority, providing essential services. That's going to take some coordination because they want those trucks to go through at a certain time and return at a certain time. We don't know that Bettendorf's going to be able to meet that schedule, so we may just continue to use the alternate route for the time being to make sure that we get the waste moved out of the authority's facilities, and we can continue operations receiving waste from the public and the franchise haulers. There obviously is some additional fees associated with this. It's taking approximately, 16 to 18 hours to make that turn. That's why they're utilizing the yard in Anderson. The drivers run out of hours. They're only allowed to drive for 12 to 13 hours. So we're working through all those logistics as we speak. So that is the transportation end of things, and hopefully 199 will get back to normal, and we'll be utilizing that route here in the next few days on a regular basis again. The landfill is able to stay open longer and potentially even on Sunday, should we need to do that, to accept waste to make sure that your facilities are being serviced. We don't really know that we'll need to be open on Sunday, but we do have extended hours to run if necessary. If anybody has any questions on the transportation piece, I can answer those now. And then I do want to talk about fire debris that's potentially going to be coming through in the future with all the fires we have.
Yes, go ahead, Jill.
So Gary, we had provided both you and Ron with letters designating you as critical infrastructure and that essential service component as part of the pandemic. Do you need an additional letter that addresses something more, and we can get that to you in order to demonstrate to the state for permission?
Jill, if you could resend that, just to make sure. We've had so many emails and so much correspondence going on. It's sort of hard to keep track. And I can make sure that Ron's aware of that, and we can provide that to the drivers should they need it.
I sent separate letters to both of you early on. So I will refine that because that was March 15th or 16th.
Yeah, that would be greatly appreciated.
Sure.
Do any board members have questions?
Through the chair.
Yes.
Hey,
go ahead.
Gary, the way I understand it, talking to CHP and the CAL FIRE, because of the shutdown and everything else, they were talking about being from 6 till 6. They weren't sure. Was that what you had heard?
I have not been in direct contact with them, Rex. This has all been through the management at Hambro at Crescent City. They're coordinating everything since they're closest to it. I don't know what hours they're going to allow that.
And my only thing is you'll run at night if that's what it comes to, because I mean they can stack the trucks and run them through and get them back in time, obviously, if they have a 12-hour window.
Yeah, so that would be ideal if we could do that and get them all together and stuff. That does provide us with a challenge logistically at the landfill if we have 20 trucks showing up all at once to process them through the scales, unloading, and then getting back them all back at the same coordinated times.
Why? By stacking, I mean they could be headed that way before, and then 20-minute intervals. They won't stack on you, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and that's the kind of stuff we want to try to work out in the next 24 hours or so that we can make sure we can get them through without having them being held up.
And the other thing is, talking to the force, I think tonight's the critical night if it breaks over or not. If they get a break, we may be in great shape.
Yeah. The other thing that we did do to make the turnaround times easier, we have suspended all backhauls of soil and recyclables coming out of the valley. And that was just to give Bettendorf a little bit of relief as far as making those critical turn times. But obviously, the objective is to get the waste moved, and we'll worry about the backhauls as soon as we can get those back into the rotation. We're going to do that.
Perfect. Thanks, Gary.
Yeah. So if there aren't any other questions on the transportation piece, I'll talk about fire debris. Obviously, we've had quite a few fires here in the Rogue Valley, from Ashland through Talent and Phoenix, and we've had a lot of loss of structures, both homes and businesses. So we've been working with DEQ, try to come up with a protocol for how do we start taking that debris. There's several areas of concern. One, there may be hazardous materials that is in that debris. There could be asbestos containing material. There could still be hot embers, depending upon the size of the lumber that's partially burned. That can, continue to be hot for weeks, if not months. So we're working through those protocols, and actually having taken material from California, both the Weed fire from several years ago and then the Hornbrook fire from just a couple years ago. CalRecycle had a very good protocol that went through all the testing regimes and what needed to be done. Because when people think about a fire, they just think, oh, it's just going to be structure. But in reality, you're dealing with abandoned automobiles that have to have clear titles. You're dealing with maybe asbestos containing material that I talked about. You may have hazardous landscape like trees that have to be removed safely. There's just a whole gamut of things, refrigerators or any appliance containing Freon. All that needs to be gone through and a checklist confirmed so that as stuff is removed, it's done properly and it gets to the right place to be disposed of properly. So we're in that process now. It usually takes, 30 days or longer before you start seeing any of this kind of debris. But the landfill will be getting a protocol out to our customers so that those areas that are affected with wildfires and have debris coming in, you'll know what we're going to require on this end so we can accept that waste as soon as things can get started to be cleaned up. So that is in process as we speak. Michael, I can see you talking, but I can't hear you. I don't know if you're asking me a question.
I was just about to say that. Thanks, Gary.
Yeah, thank you. I turned it off because the phone was ringing. Yes, I was just asking if any board members had questions on the fire debris issue.
No, and Gary, through the chair, I don't know how much we'll have because everything we've got now is pretty remote, and it's probably going to stay right where it burnt because there's not much left because we haven't really hit any residential areas yet. That may change after the fire. If it's getting pretty, last fire report, 20 minutes ago, CDF, it's getting squirrely again at Cat and Palm. If it gets across the Eel River, we got a problem. So right now, I don't know how much debris we'll actually have in Humboldt.
Well, not that we like to turn down business, but I hope you don't have any fire debris coming.
I hope I'm right too.
Yeah. Okay, any other questions of Gary? Thank you, Gary. Thank you for your work in this regard. Appreciate it.
Oh, I appreciate your time and thanks for all your help. Staff has been great to work with, so we'll keep everybody informed.
Excellent. Super. Okay, any other public comments or questions on matters not on this evening's agenda? Seeing and hearing none, We'll move on to item 4 on our agenda, an update on the Eureka Recycling Center. And I'll turn that over to Jill, please.
Absolutely. First off, just want to say thank you. This is going to be a hotter topic than I was anticipating it being when we were trying to wrestle with some of these things back in July. But we do have a few updates, some of which is, a lot of which is included in the staff report. I am going to ask Tyler, can you, oh, you've already got me so I can share my screen. I'm going to pull that up just real quick so we can kind of walk everybody through real quickly. Everybody hear me okay?
I can hear you.
Okay. So first and foremost, this is just a quick update as far as the Eureka Recycling Center's CRV update from the board meeting that we had last July, which has been a bit ago. As is outlined in the staff report, there were some directions for staff to do some follow-up on because we still had some uncertainties. I'm not certain who's speaking. Maybe we can have the mic muted because I'm not sure if somebody's wanting to ask me a question. Anyway, so the July meeting, a couple of the items that were asked for some updates were, first and foremost, the pop-up site. And we did confirm that that does require a unique CRV certification. We've also had the question that has gone before appointments and whether HWMA can accept CRV customers by appointments. And I will tell you that we've received some contradictory responses from CalRecycle, and I'm going to touch on this one in a few minutes. We also were able to get some clarification about our certification status. As we outlined in July, our certification to conduct a CRV buyback technically expired in May, but because we've been operating underneath the shelter in place as a resultant pandemics, CalRecycle is essentially extending that certification status. So we remain quote unquote certified, but we don't have a valid voucher. At this juncture, so long as we're continuing to operate and that we will participate in state training when that training is available, we are allowed to operate for the CRV. I just want to note that that particular clarification did not come through until the Time Standard asked a question in August. We've been getting the runaround. I think Eric spoke with 9 different representatives and we couldn't get an answer, but I got a phone call after the media called them to inquire. So I called the Time Standard back and I said, I want to thank you for sort of shaking that tree because it resulted in our getting some clarification. One of the other things we did is we took a look at alternate operators for a CRV site in terms of like an off-site kind of thing. So we approached both a nonprofit in broad concept. It was a very high level kind of conversation, as well as an out-of-county private operator to consider potentially operating satellite locations to help address the issue of lack of facilities that will do redemption. And then, of course, the other question was Humboldt Sanitation and Recology, what their current status was. And so one of the things that I just want to inform the board of is that we've been doing our best to provide CRV services within the allowable constraints that have been posed by CalRecycle. And when I'm saying that, I'm referring to all the time. Unless their statutes and regulations are explicitly addressed in legislation, they simply don't have the flexibility and they retain a really hardline stance. And that has created a lot of tension and frustration for your staff, between staff and the board, as well as the community that we're trying to serve. The situation that we are managing currently has been really dynamic and it's been shifting over several years, up to and including a phone call that we had with CalRecycle's acting director this morning. But I'm going to be talking about that a few more minutes. And as I'm going through the outline of this information, I'm just going to ask if board members could just hold their questions until we've gotten all the information presented for your consideration, because there are a number of moving parts that we are working through. So during the initial shelter in place, as board members will recall, HWMA's, our primary purpose is to be handling garbage and the collection, transportation, and disposal of trash. And so we really worked hard to realign our operations so that we had resiliency and that we had continuity of operations. The governor issued an executive order which allowed CRV closure of facilities. So that pertained to grocery stores and redemption sites, as well as the site such as we operate. The other item which occurred was in March, in early time, our broker suspended receipt of all materials until May. So they weren't accepting any materials. So we factored that into consideration. During this time, we also made a number of repairs to our baler, and we made a number of facility improvements. There was a lot of cleaning that went on. We did some realignment of our internal operations. We were able to seal and restripe the parking lot. And that took several days. And of course, we've been able to designate a special assistance parking pad, and we've delineated ingress, egress, so that we are minimizing customers bumping into each other as we are all trying to work with social distancing. And if you'll note in the bottom of that photograph, we also have a designated pedestrian and bicyclist pathway. So instead of pedestrians and bicyclists kind of coming in and co-mingling randomly, everybody is now being controlled in terms of their access to our site. Our service restoration was designed to align with the governor's roadmap to recovery. And so we had the stage approach, which we outlined to the board in July. And of course, we had been ongoing with our site modifications, and our practices became implemented. A lot of hygiene and sanitation type practices. The Eureka Recycling Center was able to resume operations on August 11th. And we had staff making direct customer contact to ensure that first, customers were wearing face coverings, that they were aware they had to practice social distancing, and gave them a quick overview in terms of the facility changes and what to expect. Customers were provided information on hazardous waste, which was also restored, the Eureka Recycling Center, and the need to perform pre-sorting of recyclable materials and CRV buyback materials once our operations were restored. The governor's order expired on August 21st, and CalRecycle staff called us and informed us that if we did not plan to reopen immediately, then we were required to decertify. The governor announced a revised roadmap to recovery for the shelter in place, and that was rolled out just prior to September 1st. So we began CRV buyback on Tuesday, September 1st. We made a number of modifications so that we could have traffic control. We had designated slots where customers were able to come in, and they had sufficient area in which they could unload their materials, place it into the buckets, and then queue up into the lane through the designated location. You'll note that on that lower photograph, there's some painted squares that are in there, so people were able to bring in their buckets and put it into areas. This really helped to ensure that there were, areas, and you weren't seeing commingling of materials, and it also provided adequate space for, some people had considerable volume of CRV. We made a number of other site improvements that were made to protect the employees and the public, some different screens and as well as when the buckets were finished being used, each one was being sanitized. We had anticipated doing a soft opening, if you will, on September 1st. And my plan was that we would then announce around noon to all of you, as well as the media, that we were open. But we opened up at 8 a.m. and by 9 a.m., word was out on social media and it blazed through the community. So we were able to keep the facility open from September 1st until September 3rd. Traffic was pretty immediate in terms of backing up from Hawthorne Street to Broadway out to US Highway 101, where it did result in some standing traffic, as well as Felt and Del Norte streets. Once customers were able to enter the Eureka recycling gate, it was an average of 45 minutes to 1 hour before they were able to get into a parking slot. The average wait time on that first day was about 3 hours in total. And City of Eureka staff had, we were in pretty constant communication. They arranged to have detours put into place the next day so that all CRV customers would be routed from Broadway onto Del Norte, Felt Street, and then Hawthorne. So we had a number of, off-site, impacts. The long lines were heavily impacting the ability of customers to drop off other materials, such as e-waste and appliances, and probably more importantly, trash and green waste. So our staff was continually going through the line in order to identify what kinds of material the customer may have, and they would then be routed around the CRV line. And we had a number of our staff working on Hawthorne Street, Felt Street, as well as Del Norte Street, which of course raises issues around the need to secure an encroachment permit and ensure that we had insurance to cover in the event that there was some sort of an accident. Trash customers, as noted, were having some difficulty in just being able to easily access the transfer station, and this included the franchise haulers as well as green waste. On Tuesday, September 2nd, Recology and Humboldt Sanitation, later that evening, they did announce that they were moving forward with decertification of the McKinleyville, Fortuna, and Redway sites for CRV redemption, leaving HWMA as the only redemption site in Humboldt County. So in your packet, I included a copy of the email that we received from the City of Eureka's Director of Public Works, in which they were requesting that HWMA reevaluate its operation and to produce a alternate options to serve our customers going forward without impacting businesses, safety, emergency access. So again, there was a lot of consultation with the city staff on this matter, and they've been nothing but really helpful as we've been trying to navigate the volume of customers that were coming in. We did anticipate that we would see a significant increase of activity. We just didn't imagine that people would be willing to wait for 3 hours, trying to get into our facility. I do want to note that after closing on that Thursday, I went around to the area businesses simply to introduce myself and apologize in person, because there were considerable impacts. Their customers weren't able to get into their facilities. Their employees were having difficulty getting in and out. We were having difficulty getting out of our own facility. So I really appreciate that everybody was very understanding, although some of them were very frustrated with us. As a result of that email that we received from Public Works, we immediately were able to schedule a meeting, which was held this last Tuesday morning morning, with representatives from HWMA, the County of Humboldt Public Works Director, City of Eureka's Public Works Director, Recology, Humboldt Sanitation. We also had representatives from Assemblymember Woods and Senator McGuire's staff. I do want to note that Assemblymember Woods' representative, Aaron Dunn, is on the call with us today. We went over a number of topics, including just summarizing what our reopening activities were and the fact that Recology and Humboldt Sanitation had given notice of decertification. We discussed the issues related to the Eureka Recycling Center and our space constraints, the traffic impact, safety, and emergency access, as well as developing a list of follow-up inquiries with CalRecycle that were needed. And that list of inquiries was carried forward by Aaron to Assemblymember Woods, and they were able then to have, I think, pretty constructive conversations and a resultant direct conversation with CalRecycle representatives. So last night, I'm just kind of, it's a little snarky, and I don't mean for it to be, but this is part of what we've been dealing with when we've been talking about CalRecycle. A meeting invitation went out last night at 11:55 p.m. for a 9 o'clock phone call with CalRecycle representatives this morning. This meeting was at the behest of Assemblymember Woods, for which I am really grateful for, because we've made a number of inquiries and we've just kind of, haven't been able to get a lot of receptiveness there. And that meeting was with the acting director of the Department of Recycling, as well as the legislative affairs staffers. So we had, this was myself and Eric Keller-Heckman, our director of operations, participated in this call. And one of the first questions that we had is whether there is indeed a deadline to notify CalRecycle of reopening. The answer was no. However, they made it very clear that if we are certified, but we are not open for the public, if there are 3 public complaints, that will trigger a review, and CalRecycle will dictate mandatory hours. And if we are deemed non-compliant, then we begin to incur violations. As a certified recycling center, we have to operate consistent with CalRecycle's requirements, or we are subject to violations. We have very little latitude or flexibility, and that is the reason that we then asked the question of, can the Eureka Recycling Center take material by appointments? The answer was CalRecycle will have a legal opinion for HWMA. They told us by 5 o'clock today. I've checked with Erin and she hasn't heard anything, I don't believe, but we have not received anything. This fundamentally does affect the next part of our conversation in terms of our options. We did finally get some clarifications because we've heard from some people, yes, you can take appointments, and we hear from other people, no, you can't take appointments. The distinction is processors can take appointments. We aren't a processor. So they were going to run the question and receive a legal opinion as to whether we could take appointments in order to reopen and take the material. The next question that we had was, with Humboldt Sanitation and Recology decertifying, will CalRecycle examine those convenient zones exemptions, and will they review those? And will obligated retailers be then instructed to provide redemption services? And the answer is no, they will not review the current exemptions. And no, they cannot and will not force private businesses to perform those services. So the next question we asked is, so what kind of financial assistance could you provide to HWMA if we are the only facility in Humboldt County that is going to be able to provide some CRV redemption, recognizing, of course, that Our site is undersized. It wasn't designed for this, and we have had a tremendous impact upon the surrounding areas. And we're looking for that sweet spot, if you will. And they responded that they don't have any funding that they could provide to us. They can only provide funding as it is directed by the state legislature. We then asked an obvious question that I think has been on everybody's minds, which is, given that there is no place to functionally enable customers to redeem their CRV deposit, can they suspend the CRV deposit collection? And their response was they can only do that if it is directed by the legislature. Again, those were the kind of the highlights. And I would ask Eric at the end of the presentation if there was anything that I overlooked in this to let me know. I do want board members to know that it's been such a dynamic situation that my presentation has really shifted a few times, and even more so after we had the conversation with CalRecycle. So before our suggested alternatives are being presented, I want to just remind board members, I know that you know this, but I just want to kind of emphasize that we have worked really hard over a number of years to reduce our costs, to stabilize our rates, to realize efficiencies while continuing to expand our services without raising our waste disposal fee. We are incurring unanticipated costs associated with the pandemic and with the fires and the resultant financial cost for the detour, which hopefully will be of a very limited duration. There's going to be an additional financial impact. And depending on the board direction that we receive this evening, there could be some additional cost to operate CRV buyback services. And really what we are asking from you is to get an idea of what is your accepted threshold for absorbing the financial cost. It's not a barrier question, and I want to make that really clear. It's not a barrier question, but it's a question to assess what is the board's willingness for the community to fund CRV buyback activities, because these additional costs will likely be carried on the tip fee. And so if we can get a sense of where that comfort level is, that helps us to provide some parameters for us to develop realistic options for your consideration. And that's where things have been a little stymied following the conversations back in July.
Okay, are you done, Jill?
No, not quite yet. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I got
That's
my
all right.
slide on a
Good.
slide.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
The other item that I just want to note is that currently the recycling fee, which is built into the tip fee, does support the overall Eureka Recycling Center activities to the tune of just shy of $750,000. So what I'm asking for, what the threshold is, you're currently at about $750,000. So the conversation that we had this morning with CalRecycle provided a pretty key piece of clarification, which is those obligated retailers will not be required by CalRecycle to provide CRV redemption services. So we started taking a look at what short-term alternatives are. And one of the key things, of course, is short-term alternatives which are able to mitigate traffic and emergency impacts in order for the Eureka Recycling Center to resume CRV buyback. And so that's one option. Is we actually have two options on this one, but that's one key question. And the other one, of course, is that HWMA to decertify temporarily. The long-term considerations, if we're able to have that conversation, is the need to assess what the fate of the state CRV program is, because if we start looking long-term into financial investments, we need to know that the CRV program isn't going to fold up and go away, and then we are left with a significant investment of infrastructure, equipment, and staffing. And then, of course, if there's a possibility of developing additional redemption locations, the CRV program was not intended to have one regional redemption location, but rather multiple. But maybe we need to have that conversation about the development of one or multiple redemption centers. And again, we know that retailers are not going to be a part of this equation. So the first alternative that we have developed, and again, this one becomes inherently problematic because we have not heard back from CalRecycle. The alternative is that the Eureka Recycling Center would reopen for CRV buyback only, no recycling drop-off. We could perform CRV buyback on an appointment basis in order to mitigate off-site traffic and the safety issues that have been raised by the city of Eureka, and in order to process the number of customers at a sort of a maximum sort of capacity, and it's going to be nowhere close to what we've done historically. We would need to eliminate the drop-off acceptance of source-separated recyclables, appliances, and e-waste. And currently, underneath our budget, we can only operate 5 days a week based on our existing staffing and financial constraints. The issues that we're going to encounter is that, one, there is insufficient service to handle the material volume which is in the community, and we know that. There's uncertainty in terms of glass hauling. So glass hauling services at this time are done under contract with Humboldt Sanitation. And so they take all of our glass that we collect through the CRV, and it is bundled and transported to San Leandro. Our contract will be expiring in November, and with Humboldt Sanitation deciding not to move forward with their CRV buyback operations, that may or may not impact how we are handling the glass hauling component. I've had a conversation with Tasha, and the intention was that we were going to be talking sooner about this, but then all these fires blew up. And so their operations are now being dispatched to provide service to those fire camps. So that is an uncertain question in the moment. The loss of non-CRV revenue may increase the need for the HWMA subsidy. We receive about $150,000 a year through the sale of those non-CRV materials, and it does get plowed back into our overall operational costs. The combination of the recycling drop-off services affects the city of Eureka's diversion. And one of the things that's important to note is that when HWMA was formed, and then there was the subsequent purchase of the transfer station and the landfill, one of the conditions that we were obligated to meet is to operate a Eureka drop-off site for the benefit of City of Eureka residents. So this particular option would create, would impact this. I wonder if somebody could mute their phone.
Hey, Rex, can you mute on?
Thank you. One of the things that board members should know, and as we're going through this, we've tried to identify reasonably intended consequences and unintended consequences. If we're not doing the recycling drop-off for the City of Eureka, the other thing that we are not doing is providing drop-off for appliances and e-waste for all the customers that have been coming into HWMA. And we do receive a pretty significant volume of appliances and e-waste. Humboldt Sanitation collects appliances. They bring us the appliances that they've collected to the Eureka Recycling Center. So we don't see that this is an easy alternative, but we want to just share with you that this is one thing that we could do. The second option, I should say, and this is a short-term option, is that we would operate the Eureka Recycling Center with limited CRV buyback and recycling drop-off. We would need to have appointments apply to both CRV and drop-off customers per day in order to mitigate the off-site traffic impacts and safety issues. But this would allow us to continue the acceptance of source-separated recyclables, the appliances, and e-waste, and to stagger it in such a way that those folks that are dropping off appliances aren't being held up in lines on site before they're able to get in, I should say the CRV lines. Again, the same issue presents itself, which is there's just simply insufficient capacity to handle the amount of CRV material that's been held both in backlog and with the closure. And I shouldn't say closure, with the decertification of the other 3 locations, it puts that much more of a burden on our facility. The same issue presents itself as far as the uncertainty around the glass hauling, but the advantage is that it would enable the continued receipt of the drop-off of appliances, e-waste, and source-separated materials, which we are currently obligated to accept. The third short-term alternative is that we decertify the Eureka Recycling Center, and that would be a temporary basis. We would decertify until we have a viable plan that has been developed, which avoids those potential violations by CalRecycle. The state CRV program, of course, as we mentioned numerous times, was designed to have multiple redemption locations that were operated by obligated retailers. And the recycling center decertification, we thought, and actually this is one of the slides I didn't get a chance to get back to, we thought that it was going to force CalRecycle to evaluate those exempted convenience zones, but they did clarify in our meeting today that in fact it does not. Obviously, the big drawback is that there are then no CRV services to Humboldt County residents at all, and we would request legislative representatives to support statewide suspension of CRV deposit collection. In terms of some longer term concepts, one of the things that we discussed internally was, maybe there's an opportunity for HWMA to operate a regional collection site. This would be a long-term approach that would enable convenient redemption services for city and county residents. The problem that we would encounter and we would need to find a way to work through is that a single redemption location is going to require sufficient design in order to prevent traffic, customer congestion, and material volume. Same thing that we're encountering at our site right now, but maybe there's an alternate site that we could be looking at. The primary disadvantage, of course, is that this would be Eureka-centric or maybe Arcata-centric if we're not able to find a suitable location, but it wouldn't be dispersed throughout the county. For HWMA to start evaluating this, we are looking very much at the fact that it would affect our solid waste disposal fees. We would need to find some additional funding sources and the potential that we would take on long-term debt to fund either however we would end up securing the property, whether it was through a long-term lease or it was through actual property acquisition. There would be a need to increase our staff in addition to securing the site, having a building and fencing and security systems and the equipment and all the associated overhead and the material handling cost. We would also need to take into consideration the long-term viability of the CRV deposit program. Because again, we don't want to be making a significant financial outlay that it would be spread out over a course of a number of years only to have the program fold up. The primary problem that we have with respect to this particular option is that it is failing a state system, and we're using our at the local cost. Second consideration that we've been discussing is HWMA to operate multiple CRV collection sites. So this would be sort of a satellite type concept. So again, this would be a long-term approach that could enable convenient redemption services for city and county residents. There would be multiple redemption locations, which would then relieve the whole issue around traffic, customer congestion, and material volume. In the short term, we'd probably get considerable, and that would be taken into consideration. Same issues present themselves in terms of how it would end up being funded and the potential for the cost to be borne on the solid waste system, and just the continued enabling of a failing state system, which means CalRecycle can continue to say, well, they're finding a way to work with it, so we don't really have to address the whole problem. CalRecycle has had thousands of recycling centers closed statewide, and they still have, this has been over the last 5 years, and they still haven't found a way to functionally address the problem. This is not something that's occurring just within the county of Humboldt. The existing state of CRV redemption, as you know, is adversely affecting California residents and businesses. And CalRecycle currently is collecting about $1.6 billion annually. The recycling centers who are performing the redemption cost, we recoup our costs through the sale of the materials primarily. Currently, those materials have a very low value, which is contributing to redemption centers closing, such as the decision that Humboldt Sanitation and Ecology have made, or they need to be subsidized by local government. It's not sustainable. It's not fair to California residents who deserve to be able to collect their deposits back. It's a state program, and it requires a legislative fix. So we are also proposing, in addition to getting some direction from you, that a letter be prepared to the legislature and be circulated to CSAC, California League of Cities, RCRC, in addition to the other cities and counties who are our member agencies, in which to raise this level, because the current situation is untenable. I'm sorry, I got distracted. I've got some quail on the front porch and they're really adorable. I do want to very quickly note that I would like to ask if Eric has any additional questions or comments based on this, and that Eric is available to speak specifically around operationally some of the challenges that we encountered over the course of the last week. I really want to underscore how amazing the general public was in coming to our facility. They were patient, they were wearing their mask, they were really appreciative of what was going on. And I think a lot of people recognized after sitting for several hours without getting out of their car that we too are doing the best that we've been able to do. So Eric, is there anything else that you would add to this?
No, not at this time.
Okay. Chairman, I would ask if anybody has any questions.
Sure. Okay, Tyler, can we go down the roll call and see if people have questions? Tyler?
Sorry, I am here just handling it all at once. That's fun.
Yeah, can we go down the roll call, please?
Of course. Pereira?
I don't have any questions at this time. Thank you.
Hogan?
I don't have any questions. No, it was all very clear. A lot of information.
Wilson?
Yeah, I probably have a couple questions, but I'll try to make it short. Not maybe it was already mentioned. Is the fact that we're inundated by the people coming to drop it off? Is that something that will level out? Like this is a surge because everybody's been holding on to it for 6 months. Is there a point where that will level out when people can get caught up, and then there won't be such a big backlog?
So the short answer is that's what we initially anticipated. There are a lot of people who have been collecting and holding on to that CRV material. The difficulty for us is that we don't know what that volume is. We just have no way to estimate how much material is coming in. Part of what I'm going to provide to you is anecdotal, but at the point that we started turning cars away on Thursday, Eric, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that they, even after the customers that we had waiting in line, we started turning people away at 9:45. We didn't clear the last customer until 1:30 in the afternoon. And Eric and his staff turned away, I think you had indicated 240 customers. Is that correct?
Yeah, it was between 200 and 250 customers each day that we had the facility open for CRV.
And what we know is that we didn't make any sort of push. So I anticipate it's going to be pretty significant. And the short answer, Frank, is that yes, at some point we'll get through that backlog. We just don't have a way to quantify what that backlog is. The game changer for us in terms of how we're managing things is that with the decertification of the other 3 transfer sites, I don't know when we clear that backlog and what the new normal will be. I mean, it's going to be, we anticipate easily a double or tripling of what we were previously processing. Let's just assume that nobody had closed. There's no backlog of material, just the volume that they are currently handling. If it was all coming into us, we're looking at 2 to 3 times the volume, and we were already stretched to capacity. Does that help, Frank?
That helps. The other question is on the I guess my clarification on what a retailer is a retailer someone that actually that buys the aluminum cans or the CRV glass from us as HWMA and then deals with it? It's
not quite. The obligated retailer is they fall into a category, and I'm suddenly blanking on the name of the publication, but basically they are a retailer that has more than $2 million a year in sales, and they are the ones who are selling those beverage containers to the general public. And so it doesn't relate, there's no money exchange between the retailer and HWMA. The retailer is collecting that money, and they are simply collecting that pass-through cost that the beverage manufacturers provided to CalRecycle for that. As far as HWMA then sells the material, and that's how we recoup our cost. Is that clear?
I think so. If I understand this, is I as a consumer, I go out and I buy a 6-pack of soda pop, and I end up paying the CRV on those cans. And then later I come back to HWMA and I sell those back. I bring those back to you, and I get my CRV money back. Now you're stuck with the 6 cans. Then it's up to you to sell those on top of that after recycling them, funneling the money as a pass through. Is that how it works?
I'm gonna take a stab at kind of going back one more step. So beverage manufacturers who are producing the beverages and placing them into the containers, they do basically a count of those containers, and for 5 cents on every container, or 10 cents. They then cut a check directly to CalRecycle plus a 1.5% administrative fee. They then take that beverage and they distribute it to distributors and to the grocery stores, and they charge those folks the cost plus the CRV. So basically it's a pass through. So when the customer comes to the counter with their container, they are paying the cost of the beverage as well as that CRV pass through fee. When they finished consuming it, they bring it to us. We pay them the 5 cents. We take that container, and then we package all the containers and we sell it to a materials broker. We sell it at a cost, and I'll use sorry, we are currently selling aluminum at 32 cents a pound, and that is down from, Eric, what was the cost?
Mid 50 cents a pound. So last year, this time, we were right around 54 to 56 cents per pound for the same material.
And that's actually down from where it was a couple of years ago, which was like $1.62 a pound. Currently, a year ago, PET plastic was 18 cents a pound. Today, it's 11 cents a pound. And those materials are getting thinner, along with many beverage manufacturers beginning to shift that material composition so that they're looking towards lighter materials. So when we package this material, we get it to a broker. That's how we're making our money to cover all of our costs, in addition to the 5 cents that we paid to when he came in with his beverage container. We do have some ability to recover some processing costs through those materials from the broker that we've sold things to. And then CalRecycle does provide to some recyclers, but not HWMA, a handling. We're just not eligible for it. It's as simple as that. So the money that we're paid to CalRecycle, you know, a piece of it will come to us, but in large not. Some of that money that is paid to CalRecycle is going to support the city and county's beverage container programs. So the county of Humboldt receives $10,000 a year, and the individual cities receive $5,000 or less per entity on that front. So there are different ways in which the money is distributed by CalRecycle.
Okay, I'm not dragging this on, but so in essence, the money that we're passing, the nickel for the CRV, when you pay that money back to the person bringing in the CRV, we're not, CalRecycle is not directly giving HWMA a nickel, that same nickel back.
That's correct.
We get a portion, and then it's left up to us to try to find a way to get rid of it and come out on this whole deal.
That is correct.
I think you've clarified where my question is. Okay. And I just say that what everybody else I'm sure is hearing here, it's a sad state of what the state is doing in its effort to be magnanimous and say we're going to fix the world's recycling problem, and then turn around and say let's fix a busted system with the local and county governments to fix it. And that's a very sad state of affairs, particularly on the side of the state of California. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. Next person, Tyler.
Castellano.
Thank you. I have a few questions. Let's see, if HWMA decides to decertify, how arduous is the process for recertification, or how long might that take?
I'm actually going to defer to this one on Eric. The process of preparing the readiness plan and the information that CalRecycle needs to review is pretty straightforward. It's not a terribly arduous process at all. But Eric is more familiar because he has gone through this twice now. Eric?
Yeah, Jill summed it up actually pretty well. It's not an arduous process at all to be a recycling center or to get certified as a recycling center. The process is a little longer if we were to go the processor route. But so if we were to decertify and then come back to CalRecycle for recertification, we would in essence be getting a new certification. So we would be looking at 60 to 90 days. 30 days to prepare all the paperwork, make sure we get all of our ducks in a row. And then for new certifications, CalRecycle has up to 60 days to review our information.
Thank you. Let's see. And then the next question, this is somewhat tangential, but I'm curious to know. I know Donna Wood is on the line too as well. And so if you don't know it, Jill, I know the city of Eureka was operating a program for accepting glass to use in road repair. And I'm just curious if that program is still going on. You know, I know that obviously couldn't absorb all of the county's, you know, extra glass, but it may be something we could do within the city of Eureka.
I actually don't know what the current state of that program is. I would encourage Donna to weigh in on this one. In terms of the potential to look at glass diversion, that material actually needs to go to a processor in order for us to, I mean, we would need to find a way to recoup our costs again. And certified processors, we are able to receive a portion of the funding that they are provided. And CalRecycle currently, because glass, some types of glass, has a negative value, CalRecycle has also helped to prop that up by providing funding for that material. If it ends up going to, in this case, Mercer Fraser, unless they were a processor, there would be no ability to tap into those monies. Eric may have some additional insights on that one, but as far as whether the city of Eureka, the program that you have operating for collection is operating, I don't know the status of that. I do think that if we're looking at some form of recycling or reuse, especially in the form of aggregate or something like this, the primary constraint is going to be what are the standards, let's say asphalt, building it into like an asphalt sort of or road base, what are the standards that contractor is having to meet? When you put in glass, it may become a bit of a wild card, and there are some projects that are not going to allow the inclusion of that material. That does become a bit of a limiting factor for the volume of material that we are receiving. Eric, did you have something additional on that one?
No, you summed it up pretty well. We would not receive, if it doesn't go to a certified processor, we would not receive reimbursement for the redemption that we paid out for those bottles.
Sure, thank you. And then it seems like this, you know, you've talked about this problem kind of happening throughout the state. Have you been able to network with other counties and regions to kind of establish, I don't know, some sort of collaboration around addressing this need and challenge?
So it's been a little bit of a hit and miss because most of the facilities are privately operated. There are some that are publicly operated. One of the big challenges that we have had is that many entities with the current shelter in place, people are working remotely. So getting people to follow through and contact back has been really challenging. I had some of the early conversations, which I did relay to you. It hasn't been changed in terms of many of the existing redemption sites are currently losing money, and they are hoping that the market is going to be able to turn. And what has been relayed is we don't know how long we continue to do this because we're all looking at decertifying if we are not able to make the finances work any longer. Certainly in the case of Humboldt Sanitation and Recology, we have all been talking. I'm not surprised that they opted to go with decertification. Most of our conversations have been, well, we're going to see if we can remain closed until January, and the market is beginning to bounce back. But that required that the governor would continue to keep that option to suspend operations. And with the governor's executive order expiring, and they had to tell CalRecycle, like we did, are you going to reopen or decertify?
Great, thank you. Just last question, and it's more like looking at some of the long-term considerations that you put forward. It seems like, long-term planning, and I'm wondering if it would make sense to kind of do some sort of regional needs assessment and then look at like developing a larger recycling center kind of program that might also accept like building materials or things that don't currently have a place to be recycled. Is that something that?
And the short answer is absolutely. And Leslie, you may remember that HWMA was really interested in the Chamber of Commerce building. And so that's why we had reached out, because we recognized that we were beginning to burst at the seams, and being able to expand our acceptance for recycling drop-off, being able to have a resale type or reuse and resale of items that would qualify. We simply don't have the space. I have an email from somebody saying, can you take these things? I mean, they're like hardly even used. And it's like, we can't do it. We don't have any place to put it. So the short story is, yes, we really do have a need for that. We would need to do a regional needs assessment. We need to have all the member agencies and all of our electeds engaged in a process where we are looking at something broader. Our transfer station really needs to be, factored into that equation, as well as we've talked about with some of the long-term sea level rise and things like this. That's why we had, when we saw that opportunity with the Chamber of Commerce building, the Chamber property would have eliminated the traffic thing for us. We could have gotten them off the road and better handled it, but that's not an option that we have at our disposal now. But yes, a regional needs assessment and going through this process to evaluate it more thoroughly is really necessary.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie. Next up person, Tyler.
Bone.
Yeah, was Assemblyman Woods on the call this morning, or one of his staffers?
So there was a few different calls. Nobody from Assemblymember Woods' office was present on the call with Eric, myself, and CalRecycle representatives. But at 10 o'clock that morning, CalRecycle representatives had a call with Aaron Dunn. There was also a call that Assemblymember Woods had directly with CalRecycle, and Aaron, you'll have to tell them when that was exactly. I think it was yesterday. But
I don't need to know when.
Okay. But word came back was that he is very much a supporter, and this is a high priority for him.
Well, and I talked to him yesterday also, but what my concern is 100 days later with no recycling, and I know you're getting phone calls, but I'm getting pretty irate phone calls a lot. 100 days later, the best we didn't anticipate this. I mean, we didn't plan on staging vehicles over at the flea market or like, and my problem with CalRecycle right now is, I mean, we keep talking about appointments, and you do know that's going to create a stacking problem, because what happens if the 10:15 shows up at 10:20, or worse yet, 10:05, and he's in line and he's in front of the 10:15 and the 10:20? Are we going to have staff running around getting the slips of paper? I mean, that's part of the concern. And I've said from day one, when we had the gas crisis in the 70s, there might be a couple of you remember that, they went by license plates, but we could also go alphabetical. And I can't believe, my problem is with CalRecycle not bending at all. I mean, I just saw a guy last night walk out of a Mexican restaurant with 2 tacos and 4 margaritas. So the ABC is obviously releasing the rules. So I can't believe in this pandemic stage and this shelter in place that after 100 days, the best we can come up with is we got nothing.
Right.
And I mean, we've got a lot of options, but none of them are good, because we're here to serve the public. And you said we're going to need more money. And we charge now, what, $10 per ton for recycling, or for, right?
Right, to support the Eureka Recycling Center and all of its activities. That's correct.
Yeah. And all the other activities. And now I understand the private enterprise. I mean, I can understand why, because there's a $40 or 40% reduction in recovery rates. So there's really no reason for anybody to get in this business. So I know why it's honest, but I'm just saying, what's the worst if we went out and did some satellite sites, got a hold of, I brought this up before, and I don't know if you followed up on it, Teen Challenge or something like that, to offset us for 4 months. Yes, it's going to cost us some money. Or who wants to be the victim and go out and says, we are no longer going to catch CRV. Here's CalRecycle. I'm giving them CalRecycle's number. I don't know if you called it to complain, but you normally don't get anybody. So I'm just disappointed. This is the best we can do. And I understand these are the cards we're dealt, but as you said, you had 500 people. We had to turn away 250 and everything else. And as Councilmember Wilson said, this will taper off and get to a steady stream, but we're going to have to do something or tell people we're not going to collect it, I guess.
And Rex, the short answer is that's why we're having a conversation with the board. If this is the direction the board wants us to go, then there's a lot of work that's going to need to be done. There's going to be a lot of heavy lifting, and we're going to need to have member agency staff assist us. We are a pretty small organization. I think that the willingness to assist is certainly there. But I didn't have that explicit direction to do this. We've been focused on what is it going to take to reopen the Eureka Recycling Center. Recognize we were still trying to address some clarifications with CalRecycle.
All right. I'm surprised you didn't know that we wanted to try to get it. Okay, we didn't spell it out. I apologize. I am just saying, if you had people were bringing in, and Eric can clarify, there were people bringing in 100, 150 pounds, and that was taking a long time to process. So if we stayed down for another 90 days, the people that didn't get in on those 3 days are now going to have 240 pounds. So it's going to take even longer. And then if we want to stay, I don't know. And telling them, CalRecycle's sitting on about $168 million of CalRecycle money, and they're not giving it up because of the budget and everything else. That's the problem. But I think we've got to do something. And I don't feel like we've made any progress. We've just got a whole bunch more roadblocks. And basically, do we want to die by hanging, by electric chair or gas? I mean, that's what I feel like the 3 options are. We're still going to be dead. And I don't know. And unless you can, I don't know which door is better, door 1, door 2, door 3, because we didn't get very many good options. And I can't worry about what Humboldt Waste Management and Recology, they're private enterprise, so we can't influence them or tell them what to do. So we just have to worry about what we're going to do. And I don't know, from all of this, Joe, I just don't see where we're going. And I'm not trying to be a hard ass. I mean, I had 4 phone calls, and I can't repeat some of the names I was called yesterday. And that was just yesterday because I was keeping track knowing we had this meeting tonight. I'm at the fairgrounds right now at the evacuation center and have been for the last 36. So I'm just saying, what is the best option short of we're just not going to do it anymore because they won't help us?
I don't have a good answer, Rex. It's been shifting, and I have been trying to put together options that we are reasonably able to accommodate with our existing staff and our existing resources.
All right. I mean, there's no decision to be made here. I mean, my option is to find a way we can recycle the citizens' recycling. If we can't do that, we have to put it out there that take a trip to Del Norte, because I guess Del Norte is still open, and I know some people are doing that. I don't know how they're doing it, and I know other places are open. But we're going to have to come out and tell people we are not planning on doing recycling, and as you said, decertify and then wait 120 days to recertify. I just think isn't this part of HWMA's initial mission statement in a way? I mean, don't the retailers, the larger retailers, don't they have to pay a $45,000 fee to opt out?
So
do I still understand?
Well, that was one of the items that we discussed, and basically, if they are in a convenience zone which has been exempted, they do not have to pay. And so, one of our questions was, if you were to go back and evaluate whether they are they no longer meet that criterion for exempted, and you are then collecting the fine that they are paying to not operate, is there a way that money could be directed to Humboldt so that it can help support the development of either multiple locations or a singular location? And the answer was, we can't do that. That would take the state.
All right, then I have no more questions.
Okay, thank you, Rex. Next. Tyler.
Sweetie.
Well, let's see. Yeah, I keep coming back to the fact that, as pointed out in Jill's slides, we're dealing with a failed system, and all the problems seem to wind up on our back. And I can certainly appreciate people who've purchased containers and want their deposits back, being frustrated, and Rex expressed that very well. But it just seems like it's not working. And it's my understanding that the obligated retailers were initially, as part of the legislation, the ones that were supposed to be redeeming, providing this redemption. And then, because of the recycling centers being somewhat prolific at the time, these convenience zones were created that made it possible for the retailers to avoid doing that. And now that all the recycling centers have shut down, they refuse to reevaluate these convenience zones. So again, the load winds up at our doorstep and compromises our ability to process and manage solid waste, our core mission, other recyclables like appliances and hazardous waste. So I'm just really disappointed. It seems like we've got a dinosaur in the state government that is not able to adapt and change, and we're supposed to somehow resolve it at the local level, and I don't support that strategy. So next steps, Jill, do you want to entertain motions or speak?
Before we,
To just go down the list of the short term and the longer term and see what board members.
well, I want to circle back with just 2 points, because Rex asked a question that I didn't answer, and he asked if this was part of our responsibility. Our responsibility is to be managing solid waste. That is our priority. The second piece, which is equally as important, is the closure and post-closure of the Cummings Road landfill, and then the operations of programs. Through the agreement that we entered into with City Garbage when we acquired the transfer station and landfill sites, we agreed to operate a Eureka drop-off center. That did not include CRV. We then contracted out, because HWMA was only a handful of actual HWMA employees, and all other services were contracted out through other operators. HWMA had recycling services contracted out with the Arcata Community Recycling Center. And so it was ACRC early on that included that CRV buyback as part of the drop-off activities that were performed. When HWMA assumed the operations of the Eureka Recycling Center, because at that time it was called the Eureka Community Recycling Center, and now it's the Eureka Recycling Center. That was a considerable conversation that the board had in 2009. And it was a considerable conversation because in the JPA, there's actually a provision that HWMA has a non-compete clause for recycling. And that was because there was concern that if HWMA took on some of the recycling, it would impact the Arcata Community Recycling Center or some of the other cities, primarily like Fortuna, should they want to come back into the fold, and things like this. So the conversation was, well, if we continue, do we continue to do CRV? Because, you know, we would also then be competing with all of these other private recycling centers. And so there was a considerable conversation that occurred with the board at that time. And the short answer is, because it was such a minute part of our overall operations, the board said yes, and they agreed to begin subsidizing the Eureka Recycling Center activities. As time has gone on, many, all, I should say, forget the many, all of those private redemption centers have closed, which meant that over time, more and more customers began coming to us. For board members that have been on the board longer, you'll recall that periodically we say another recycling center is closed, and we're getting more, you know, volume and customer transactions, and our staff are beginning to get kind of, you know, taxed or maxed out. We've added one position in the course of the 8 years to the Eureka Recycling Center to help process that material. So, you know, it's not a mandate per se. It has been a service that we have been providing, and it's been a slow shift, and it's considerably larger. So, just to give that little bit of history. And the other one, Michael, around CalRecycle. I don't want to miss the opportunity to let board members know that the state legislature did make an attempt. There was a piece of legislation that was heard back in January, and I want to say it was just at the end of January. And the upshot is they were trying to make a run at fixing some of the CRV. I mean, it's something that everybody has been desperately searching for. Unfortunately, that bill was defeated. And so before they even had the opportunity to kind of get their feet back underneath them and figure out how to strategize to, like, let's figure out how we can make it better and make another run at it, the pandemic hit. And they now are not going to be convening in a new session for another 6 months to a year. I don't remember exactly where we are right now, so forgive me. So I do think that the state legislature recognizes that there's a problem, but I think it's really, really difficult given the number of lobbyists and the pressure that they're receiving. And there was an additional bill that was just last week. It was a plastics bill that was introduced both in the Senate and the Assembly, and they were voted down, and it was by a very small margin. So there is a recognition, and they're just not able to, you know, get something functional through.
Okay. Thank you for that.
I don't know if that helps.
Yeah.
Before we, well, I'm not really sure how you want to go. Maybe having board members weigh in after they've heard all of this information with kind of what their preference is before you go asking for a motion would be appropriate. I think we've gotten to clarifying questions, but you know, in light of this information, trying to glean where everybody is.
Yeah, could you perhaps just verbalize the 3 short-term options and then the 3 long-term options, and then we could have board members express their preference or speak to whatever option
Absolutely.
resonates for them. Does that make sense as a approach?
Absolutely. And you know, again, my apologies in the sense that this has been so dynamic and we work so hard so that we can get information to you guys so you're not having to be in this position like this. Yeah.
So Leslie is raising the issue about public comment. So maybe before we do that, let's go to
have a line.
Yeah, let's go to the public and see if there's anyone in the public that wishes to speak to any of these issues we've been discussing this evening.
I'm so sorry. I got that turned off. Oh, there we go.
Right now, Ms. Dunn wanted to make some comments, so I would go to her first in line.
Yeah, Erin, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Good evening, Chair Sweeney and members of the board and staff. My name is Erin Dunn, and I am the local field representative for Assemblymember Jim Wood. And I'm here to let you know that Assemblymember Wood is well aware of the extremely frustrating nature of this situation, and yesterday spoke with the CalRecycle director. Dr. Wood emphasized at that meeting the public's ability to get their redemption value for the bottles and cans has become just about impossible in Humboldt, and asked the agency to be creative in finding ways to provide flexibility to HWMA. During the call, he urged CalRecycle to work on solutions rather than creating barriers to resolving the complex CRV problem. Humboldt County is large and it's rural, and one recycling center that accepts CRV is obviously not acceptable. He also understands this isn't a one county problem and it will take the cooperation of the administration to fix it. But in the meantime, he made it very clear to CalRecycle that he will continue to fight for a solution that serves our area. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other?
Through the chair.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, Aaron, and that I know that's the company line, but can we get follow up on what's going on? I mean, that's what I'd expect it to be said, and I'd expect that what we go after and what other counties are doing. But my concern is this is an issue now, and I know how the wheels turn very well, and I've been in touch with RCRC. A lot of RCRC counties are having similar issues, but not to this extreme, like where they just quit giving it up. We're talking about telling people, hey, we're done. It feels like, and we just can't do it. And the issue was we all wanted to do it when there was money in it. And now that there's no money in it, you know, it's a 40% drop, like you said, in plastics and hard to get rid of stuff. Nobody wants to do it. So, I mean, besides the company line, can the good doctor give us some distinct answers that are pertaining to Humboldt that can happen now? Because this can't happen in 2 weeks or a month, because I mean, we've already put these people 108 days or 112 days. And then we threw them a little bit of 3 days. Hey, here you are. And then we shut them off again.
Well, I think you mentioned that you spoke to him yesterday, so you know how frustrated he is. And the questions that he brought up to CalRecycle were the questions that they addressed with Jill this morning. And we thought we were going to have an answer by 5 o'clock today from their attorneys about the appointments issue. They're sticking by the statute, being very inflexible. So we're back at the working on it, but that's where we stand right at this moment. But of course, there's follow-up. Yeah, we'll keep you followed up.
Where do we go if we just say screw them and start giving out and start bringing it in and trying to and basically quit working for CalRecycle and work for the people we represent?
So Rex, the issue is that we are then operating in violation of state law.
I'm fully aware of that, Jill, and I'm just saying somebody's going to have to wake up the sleeping giant, or else we can say CalRecycle can just say, hey, we'll get back to you as long as we want. And I'm not being an ass here. I'm just being a realist. I mean, maybe I'm the only one that's really pissed off about this and getting all the phone calls, but people are really pissed. And all I'm hearing is, well, CalRecycle says we can't do this. We're decertifying everything else. I just don't feel like we're doing our job. And it just feels really, really lax on our part, and not our part, but on the hand we're being dealt, and we're just supposed to take it. And it's just, I'm not trying to sound like an anti-government, but I mean, they've got the money. We want to provide a service, and this, I just feel this is so unacceptable. 3.5, 4 months later, that we're no closer to an answer than we were. And this isn't against staff or anything else, but I know we've had everything else, and I know we've got the COVID, we can blame COVID on everything, but this is just unacceptable for a lot of people. And that's what I keep hearing. And if we are not going to do it, then take a full page ad out or go online, says we are just not accepting CRV because of CalRecycle, call them. And if 3 complaints are what's going to trigger them, this should pretty much put it over the top.
Michael?
Okay,
Attica,
yes, Jill.
Attica.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to address Aaron, because we did not have an opportunity to circle back, and I'm really glad you're able to join us this evening. And I really appreciate, I haven't heard or seen Aaron's name in some time in the last week. I can't tell you how many conversations we've had. It's actually been a real pleasure. And it's not just Assemblymember Woods who's working really hard on behalf, but Aaron is also going really above and beyond. I really do appreciate it. I do want to let you know, Aaron, that being creative and working on a solution was not what we heard at all. And if somehow they relayed that to you, that's a complete mischaracterization of what transpired. It was a very pleasant conversation, don't get me wrong. We pushed on certain things, but there was no creativity, and they definitely defaulted to their stat sheets. And that was really disappointing, because we were hoping too that when they understood the constraints that we're in, we're looking for a sweet spot, just a complete unwillingness. And that's just been really hard. But thank you for everything that you guys are doing actively on this.
So let's see, are there any other public members out there that we've not heard from? Linda, do you have anything to add?
Well, yes, I do.
Ooh, okay, let me.
I've been chomping at the bit. I've been chomping at the bit. One of the things that I would like to say is that we have been hopping up and down about this for quite a while. I know it's been a pet peeve of mine for years about this, even since before COVID, about how this is being funded. One of the things that I would like to see is that CalRecycle do a statewide communication to the public about the problems with the buyback centers. because I don't think it's fair that it's being held on the electeds and us to be able to answer these questions. And so far, I don't think that that's happened. The other thing that that I would say is that I don't want to lose sight of that money and that it doesn't go back into our communities in some way. One of the things that that wasn't mentioned, and it rests on kind of the question about the glass. CRV does get received at the processor. We do get through counts and through some of the audits that we've shown you in the past. We do send that information to CalRecycle to receive some CRV and processing payments that we apply toward the processing fees. So yes?
But you're talking about curbside collected material.
Right, curbside collected material.
I want to make sure that's clear. That's
Yeah.
not, okay. Go
Right.
ahead.
Well,
Right.
even in the drop off, if it goes in through the processing facility, that material is accounted for. So there is some accounting for that material to come back to this community. And one of the things that I've been having trouble with recently, and I brought this up on the call with the city of Eureka and the state, is that they're not coming out what they have to do is check our audits to make sure that what we're reporting is accurate to what we're putting in to get the CRV back, but they're not planning to do that until October, and it will be for the coming year. I have a big complaint about whether or not, since there's more CRV material going into curbside, that they're not sending the money for that material to be able to offset people's rates in the coming year. And that's the reason why we kind of designed the processing fees this way, so it could withstand these ups and downs, and so that the benefit to the city, if something like this would occur or a change in the market, that you would be able to see an offset in your processing fee. That's one thing. The state, and it's one of the other things that they're not creative about, is what to do with CRV glass. If you use it in road base, it's essentially it's not what they call as a cancellation method for CRV glass. It's essentially that's the same thing in the state of California as landfilling, so you don't get credit for CRV to those programs. That's another thing that needs to be improved. So I would say that I'm hopeful, and since Aaron's listening, is that at some point that the conversation might be able to happen, that the community doesn't lose the money for this material, and that the state put out some public information, CalRecycle in particular, and be real transparent about this, because so far I haven't seen it. And I think that's all I have to say.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Linda. Any other comments from the public? Seeing none. Back to the board and Jill. So does that make sense, Jill, to just give us a short synopsis of the short-term, three short-term options?
Well, and realize that because we didn't receive an answer from CalRecycle, it also, the options or the alternatives that we've put out here, two of them in particular, are predicated on being able to have appointments in order to address the city's concerns around the off-site traffic and the resultant safety issues on that front. But alternative one was Eureka Recycling with limited, excuse me, I shouldn't say with limited, with CRV buyback only. I'll have to strike that. It's not what it meant. So that we would just have the Eureka Recycling Center do CRV buyback only, by appointment, no recycling drop-off services. Option two would be that sweet spot, which is Eureka Recycling Center with CRV buyback and recycling drop-off by appointments. And I do want to note that we would build in flexibility so that people would arrive within a time period, not you're coming in at 10:27, you're coming in at 12 or 10:05, or whatever. It would actually be kind of grouped, and that's part of what we need to do some further examination of that. But we think that we can make an appointment structure work so that people have some allowances. Traffic happens in other places. So again, short-term alternative 2 would be limited, the CRV buyback with recycling drop-off. Short-term alternative number 3 is to decertify the Eureka Recycling Center. This would be for temporary purpose to basically allow the development of a viable plan, and it would avoid and protect us from any potential violations that CalRecycle would issue against us. And then that would help us, well, I shouldn't say it would help us, but that actually could serve as kind of a springboard for evaluating the long-term consideration number 1, which is that we would operate a singular regional collection site, or that we would look at long-term consideration 2 to operate multiple CRV collection sites. We would need to develop a plan, as Leslie aptly put. We would need to do some form of a needs analysis so we could make sure that we're getting a site which is going to be properly sited and capable of handling customers and any myriad of issues, and then figure out what the staffing requirements will be and the equipment requirements and how we would then handle that material. So those are the 5 options that we put forward. Again, the first 2 were predicated on appointments, and I was really hoping that we would have some sort of willingness, if you will, on the part of CalRecycle to allow us to do that. I'm going to ask Aaron real quick if it's okay with the chair. Can I ask?
Sure.
Aaron, can I have you put your mic back on?
Yes.
Okay. Did you get the sense or otherwise hear from CalRecycle that appointments are off the table?
No, that's what they were looking into with their attorneys today, and we were expecting an answer back before 5 o'clock.
Okay, I didn't know if maybe you had heard anything after we had touched bases. So yeah, it's still an uncertainty. I'm sorry.
Okay, well, Tyler, can we go down the roll call again, and each board member can speak to are we choosing, Jill, between the short-term options and the long-term options as 2 different strategies, related, connected, but 2 recommendations or directions to staff? Or do you want to look at it as one set of options and select one option from those?
It would be helpful to have a sense of what the short-term preference for the board is, and then some broad direction for long-term, because we do have limited sort of capacity, and so if we're able to get clarification for the board's preference for the long-term approach, that will use our time wisely.
Okay, good. So Tyler, can you go down the roll call, please?
Herrera?
Yeah, so I think in terms of the short-term options, the second one, with being able to maintain both CRV and e-waste and appliance services, that would be where I'd be leaning, but obviously that's pending that we can move forward with appointments in some way. So hopefully we'll hear back soon about that. I also don't know if it's worthwhile, since that's a short-term solution, if we do hear back soon from CalRecycle, if we don't have consensus or a majority opinion on the short-term solutions, that may need to do a special meeting to, if there's any new information that might influence what a short-term solution might look like. But that's where I'm at for the short term. In terms of long term, for me, I'm pretty open in terms of if we're talking about, you know, multiple sites or doing one site. I feel like there's a lot of unknowns, and I know there'd need to be more information about what the cost would be and facilities. And so I'm not necessarily in a place of saying let's just research it all, but I guess what I'm saying is I think I'd be curious to hear what my colleagues think about that. If there's a strong opinion either way, because I think there's going to be pros and cons. Obviously, trying to manage one facility is easier than trying to manage multiple. So I think on a very surface level, that's probably where I would lean. But I'm definitely open to other folks' thoughts on that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sophia.
Hogan?
Yeah, so regarding the short-term option number 2, by appointments, one thing I've been thinking about is what qualifies as an appointment. I know Rex talked about kind of like the last digit of your license plate. You know, if we were to, would it be possible for us to change our operating hours such that the first letter of your last name, your Mondays, or license plate number or something like that, in order to both kind of avoid the classification of an official appointment and also to save some staff time in scheduling specific appointments? Is there a way we can just change our basic operating hours and our level of service such that we serve everyone with, you know, if your first letter of your last name is between A and D, you're on Mondays, and so on and so forth. And secondly, is it CalRecycle that would enforce this whole appointment statute if it does come back that that they're not willing to budge on that? Is that something they're going to turn around and sue us over, or kind of who is the enforcement agency, and what would the consequences be of going ahead and actually serving the public like we know needs to be done? So just curious about that. And as far as long term, yeah, I agree with Sophia. I'm definitely open to hearing more about the first long-term option as far as a needs assessment and figuring out what our options are moving forward.
Wilson?
Yeah, on the short term, I don't have, I hope I got them in my mind what the short term is. I like what the last 2 directors have said, particularly Hogan, that you come out with something that doesn't have to take a lot of detail in working out like the old gas station thing on bringing it in. But one of the things that I don't see is putting out a lot of satellite locations, because that just creates staff and administrative issues. The part that the public somehow, I guess it's long term, that says if we decertify that so we don't get fined. My long term picture is that that we get to a place where we don't get fined, and I would say decertify. The state has somebody has got to get the idea that this is not working, and as Director Bones said, we got to wake somebody up. Whether we start that out in the short term with a lot of public notification that we buy the full page ads, or we put things out that this is what's coming. It's coming down the path that we can't afford this at $750,000 unless you want to double your bill, and we'll spend $1.5 million to try to subsidize it. But at some point in time, it's going to go away, and the state's going to have to deal with it. We're here to do a problem that our society has to deal with. And anybody that's known me for any length of time know how I feel about there's 4 pillars, of which I'm adding 2, called fire and police. But there's power, water, sewer, and garbage. You take any one of those 4 pillars away, your functional society collapses. And so the society has to foot the bill for that, whatever that is. And if one of the ways that our society has to deal with the fact is, first of all, don't buy CRV water bottles, put water in a bottle that you can refill, and not buy CRV. Purchase things that don't have CRV so you don't gather them up and you have to take them back. Change your lifestyle so that you don't create things to go in the landfill or to be recycled. And then secondly, let the state deal with it because they're the ones that have created the problem. And so we find our legal path out of this, so we're not fined, and then we back out and we go about what our real business is. But we also make our society and our local economy, our local people understand that. We've got to let them know where we're coming from and what's going to happen to them. And hopefully we'll wake up some of the rest of our local people and get them to respond. That's about enough of my ranting for the moment.
Very wise words, Frank. Thank you.
Castellano.
Let's see. Well, I definitely don't support option 1. Alternative 2, I, again, would be supportive, but of course we can't really know if that's even an alternative right now. And I do agree that it would be beneficial to, streamline the appointment process if at all possible. I'm also, somewhat supportive of option 3, decertification, even though, I mean, for sure, I'm frustrated about all of this. I do think that may send a stronger signal about the scale and scope of the problem, rather than us like kind of continue to sort of like solve the state's problem for them, on our level, at our scale. So, again, like, especially, I think it really depends on it. If CalRecycle does not seem like they're willing to work with us, and they don't seem like they care about our challenges here, then I think decertification, especially considering that it's not that long of a turnaround to recertify, if we needed to, or if we wanted to go back to that. In terms of long-term solutions, I would support either one. I like the streamlining of a centralized space, especially if we want to look at other kinds of materials. But in terms of like vehicle miles traveled, I wonder if having some satellite spaces for just a couple of materials, like cans or something, might be practical, just so that we don't have like people from all over the county driving to recycle cans. It seems kind of not the best approach. I think that's, and again, during this meeting, I kind of glanced at the CalRecycles, like they have a monthly board meeting. I don't know if it would be, I'm like, would it be beneficial for, members of our board to, write a letter, show up or write a letter to their board. So that's something, maybe I'll follow up with you about as well.
Boom.
All right. As far as glass and asphalt, just so everybody knows, there's a test case going on in Oroville as we speak, seeing if it's going to work. You have to understand the glass has to be perfectly clean to be used because it's going into a cooking facility and air quality gets involved. So I don't know who wants to volunteer to clean the peanut butter jars, but everything has to be clean. So but it is part of the fact you don't have to pay for the disposal. With that being said, the appointment part of it is what I said. You take the registration. Every car has to have registration. You take the first letter of the registration, A through L, L through T, and then the balance. And I don't know if that's as much an appointment or those are the days it's available to those people to circumvent CalRecycle's situation. With that being said, the county will assist if we want to do this, and we'll look for extra personnel, i.e., but we will handle the traffic control. Because the traffic control, what you do is you stage over at the Eureka Flea Market. If we're going to do this, we could do all the checking over there and send them over, have 20 cars in line as needed, and send them over. They'll have plenty of time to get, and send them over in groups of 5 or whatever the case be. but the county will help assist and pay for that because we are going to have to start recycling. Decertifying for another 90 days. I mean, again, I'll say, I mean, I'm going to forward all these phone calls to somebody else because I'm tired of them. And as far as what we're trying to do with our elected officials, we're just going to have to get a little bit harder. And as they said, I don't know how many other counties that you guys have talked to that are still recycling, and if it's such a nightmare how they're doing it. So I know we're down into one. What we should do is talk with our former partners, i.e. Humboldt Waste Management, Recology and Eel River, and then the county rebuilt the facility in Redway. So there is room for us to set up in Redway. We will make it work. But if we can talk with Linda and see if we can have a space over there, because obviously they had a space, to see if we could do it, and if we have to handle it if they don't want to. And that, again, with a private enterprise, I think that's their option. So if you want to decertify and go down for another 90 days, you go for it, you guys. But I'd love to see how we're going to tell everybody that. I mean, and long term, I want to get back to where we're recycling. I don't have a problem with going down to 3 stations because everybody, no matter how far they have to drive, come to Costco, Walmart, Winco, whatever, at least once a week. So they can drive over to the recycling center. I don't think we're going to break anybody's back on that one. So, but I'm just saying, I mean, I'm not going to wait another 90 days before we're taking care of this. And I think we have to reassign that fact to our electeds. And I'm guarantee you when I get off this phone call, I'm calling McGuire just called me, but I'm going to call McGuire back. And this is unacceptable to the people we serve, and it's a pain in the ass for us. And like Frank said, we can sit here and whimper about, well, CalRecycle said, then we take it to CalRecycle on a different level. I mean, and we start handing out cards. Sorry, we can't recycle. Call these guys, ask them why. They're going to tell you why is because we don't want to do it. I finally got through, and that's what they say. He says they have every option in the world to do it. They just have to adapt. So my frustration level is so friggin' extreme right now, but I haven't slept in 36 hours either. So thanks.
Thank you, Rex.
And Sweeney.
Well, let's see. I do see value in the short-term option of number 3, decertifying temporarily. As many of the directors have spoken of that issue, it sends the strongest message to Caltrans that this is just untenable, as well as giving us time to, look at longer-term ways of dealing with this, once this temporary decertification is resolved, whether that's, a centralized facility or satellite facilities. I think Elaine raised the issue. I think she was asking the question, if we go ahead and make appointments, but we don't call them appointments, it's Mondays, it's A through F, and Tuesdays, it's F through L, et cetera, whether that would be something that CalRecycle, I guess, would see as appointments and see as a violation, and what could they do about it? Would they start fining us, for example, which would seem self-defeating to me, but I thought that was an intriguing situation. I like what Rex said about the county perhaps assisting the authority in terms of staging over the flea market and metering, people trying to drop stuff off or redeem their CVR, yeah, whatever. I also like that letter idea of, contacting the legislature and get some support from Cal League of Cities and other, the rural government collection. What is that? RC, Rural Governments of California, whatever that is.
Yeah, RCRC.
Yeah, RCRC. Because, if CalRecycle says, well, we're constrained by our statutes and don't feel like they can be flexible without, a change in statutes, then that's, legislation. And it seems like, given that we have connected with both Senator McGuire and Assemblyman Wood's staff, starting to work that routine or avenue of trying to affect change in the legislation that would, relieve us from the responsibility of so many of the directors have said of solving the state's problems at the local level. Okay, so I think what Jill is asking of us this evening is give staff, some direction. Does the board feel like they're ready to do that? Do you see, Jill, an actual vote for one option versus another, or if we can achieve some kind of consensus short of voting? What's your preference in that regard, Jill?
So as y'all have been having some conversations, I mean, this has been really helpful. And, it sounds like there's certainly three representatives who would like to see the short term of the Eureka Recycling Center with continued acceptance of non-CRV drop-offs. That is all predicated on the answer from CalRecycle around the appointment question. I like the suggestions around the appointment. I'm going to split hairs on this one a little bit, and that is, in concept, I really like what both Elaine and Rex have suggested in terms of using this, a license plate component, but in the beginning, we actually would need to have appointments in order to manage the volume of people who are coming in with that, letter L coming into the facility, because there's just such a backlog of material. So I think it could be a stepped kind of process where we have some control over appointments and then expand once we start seeing that material volume is beginning to reduce. I think that will be a better use of the county's resources in terms of them being able to help stage and regulate inbound traffic that are coming in through license plate designations, for example. So it wouldn't be immediate. So I like that. But again, that's all predicated on what CalRecycle's answer is going to be. And I do want to answer Elaine's question, which is, who is the enforcing agency around that appointment concept? It's going to be CalRecycle. And if CalRecycle says that we are in violation, they will do a review, and they could force that we have to be open more hours than we're currently being able to do in the course of our existing budgets. So
in which case we could just decertify, right? And be done with it.
And that's correct.
Okay.
And so that's where
Through the chair, I mean, what we're talking about is if CalRecycle, who we haven't heard back. I think Director Pereira said it best. Can we have an emergency meeting next week or the week after, so we have time to post it and get these answers from CalRecycle, so so we have all the cards in our deck to play this hand. We're playing this hand short carded, going if, and we don't have answers. And I don't want to do options. I want to recycle. I want to be able to take CRV, but we're coming up with all the reasons we can't. They won't take appointments. They won't do this. They won't do that. I would much rather see us have you guys work on a few of these logistics with our county staff and the appointment issue and how we can go through that and wait for an answer from CalRecycle, then go through the idea of voting on something that may not be worth a damn because CalRecycle says no. I mean, it seems like a lesson in futility, but then again, this is government, so I'm used to that.
No, that's a good point, Rex. I mean, that kind of assumes that tomorrow we'll hear from them, or if not tomorrow, then Monday we'll hear from them. And the next thing you know, it's a week from today and we still haven't heard from them. So that's been the pattern, I think, that we're kind of stuck with. But I hear what you're saying.
And Rex, I want to just offer, that's been the challenge in trying to bring an item before you guys. We had what we thought was kind of a relatively clear pathway, last night before midnight. And our conversations with CalRecycle, they brought these things up, but I already had the bulk of this presentation made, and so I tried to revise it just so we could have a conversation. And I really appreciate the depth of the conversation that we are able to have. They're not obstacles, and I want to make that really clear. I'm trying to figure out how we navigate, and I was really anticipating, based on what was told to us, we'll have you an answer. So that would have kind of shifted.
Oh,
so
and Jill, I'm just saying, I've really got to get onto another fire call because we've got an issue that's far bigger, believe it, than recycling. But we've spent almost 2 hours on this, and I don't think I'm any closer to what the hell we're going to do than I was 2 hours ago, because we don't have any answers for CalRecycle. I'm not saying that's your fault or anybody else's fault, but yeah, I know we talked about appointments 3 months ago, and and you and I have talked about it before, and we're still nowhere closer. So I almost want to go out of the hook, and I'll get a hold. I mean, I'll get RCRCs because we have a waste management. We have our garbage division of our RCRC who lobbies, and then see if we can get some better answers, because right now we're not getting answers. And I appreciate Assemblyman Woods and everything he's done, but we don't have any answers. We just know he's going to support us, and there's not a doubt in my mind he's going to support us because that's what he does. But with all that support, we still don't have any answers. And I'm just saying, there's no way I can vote on anything without a little bit. This is about as clear as mud right now, without CalRecycle's blessing or whatever we need from them.
So if we were to direct staff to the short-term option 2, so CRV, buyback, and recycling drop-off by appointment, and if that is not acceptable to CalRecycle, the default is to decertify temporarily. Would that be an appropriate step to take?
Yes.
And then the longer term, it seems like, there's the letter idea that I think it certainly has value and would be worth addressing. I guess related to decertifying temporarily implies that we will be looking at longer term ways of dealing with this, either through a single or multiple drop-off center. Does that resonate with board members in that regard? So is there a motion for directing staff to pursue short-term option 2, and again, that's CRV buyback and recycling drop-off by appointment. And if that is not acceptable to CalRecycle, then we will decertify temporarily and begin to look at other ways of dealing with this through either a single or a multiple drop-off locations throughout the county.
Can I add one more item?
Certainly.
If we have someone who will make a motion, I would ask if the board could direct the chair to send a letter to CalRecycle as well as the cities, so your respective councils are aware of this, and one that would go to McGuire and Woods, as well as CSAC, California League of Cities, and RCRC. I don't know if people want to give him parameters. I kind of went through that one particular slide, but I think that capturing those comments would be speaking from the board as part of this would be beneficial. We definitely have CalRecycle's attention, so a letter is definitely going to resonate.
So this would be a letter to our representatives, our state legislature representatives.
I think we can word it. We can work on a wording, and I can work with you on that.
Yeah, okay, sure. So we'll add that to a possible motion.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, Frank's made the motion. Is there a second? Well, I will second that motion. All in favor using the roll call, please?
Can I have it restated?
Yes, we're looking at short-term, directing staff to pursue short-term option 2, which is CRV buyback and recycling drop-off by appointment. And if that runs into a problem with CalRecycle, then the default is decertify temporarily. And during that temporary decertification, begin to look at other ways of dealing with this issue, including, your idea of staging at the flea market and metering, so on and so forth. We're also including in the motion a letter from the chair, but representing the board, to McGuire and Wood regarding the predicament we find ourselves in and seeking their help in finding a way forward. Is that clear, Rex?
Yes.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second. Tyler, can we go down the roll call and have a vote, please?
Herrera,
Aye.
Hogan,
Aye.
Wilson,
Aye.
Castellano,
Aye.
Bone,
No.
Sweeney.
Aye. Okay, motion carries. Thank you all for your discussions, and stay tuned, and hopefully we'll be able to resolve this issue in the not too distant future. So let's see, the next item on our agenda is board member reports. Can we go down the roll call again, Tyler, and see if anybody has, we know what Sophia's going to report, so.
Herrera,
Nothing to report in regards to HWMA business.
Oh, okay.
Hogan,
Nothing to report.
Wilson,
Simply, only thing, nothing to report, but congratulations, Sophia, on your addition to your family.
Castellano,
Nothing to report. I'll echo the congratulations to Sophia.
and Bone.
No, nothing.
Sweet.
I have nothing to report either. So next item on our agenda is the executive director's report. So that's back to Jill.
So in the interest of time, we do have sort of a short synopsis. This is not, all comprehensive of a number of things that we've been involved with. I do want to note that you do have something in writing. I had Tony standing by to give you guys an update of what's been transpiring up at the landfill, but I think I'm going to go ahead and have him do that at the next meeting. There have been a number of really good things that have been happening at the landfill. I do want to note that last Saturday, as you are all aware, we did have a fire at the transfer station. And of course, the update that Gary Penning provided to us in terms of the highway closure. And we, of course, will be in close communication with he and Ron from Bettendorf Trucking so that if we need to make some operational changes to accommodate a window of time for vehicles that can get through Highway 199, we will do that. I do want to note that we're pushing 8 o'clock, so Tony, I apologize, but I think that we've definitely kept our board members' attention probably long enough. And that would conclude my report.
Okay, thank you, Jill. And thank you, Tony, for attending our meeting. I'm sorry we didn't get to you, but we'll look forward to your comments at our next meeting. Let's see. So the next item on our agenda then is closed session. There's no need for a closed session. There was no closed session this evening. So with that, I will adjourn this meeting and thank you again for your attention and deliberations. Have a good evening.